Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so this will be the third video in this little series on this soft Arkansas from Natural Whetstone Company. At the end of the last video, I had taken the stone, I'd lapped it with the 50 grit Fumbler's silicon carbide, the loose stuff. We did a cut test on it, and it came out a little bit better than what the glazed over stone was. Then I went ahead and lapped the stone to the 120, 220 Fumbler's grit, and then sharpened on it and did a quick test, and the stone just wasn't quite feeling right. The edge that we got was okay. I mean, it takes some hair off my arm. It did drop to, I think, 8 pounds of force to make the first cut, and went to 13 to 14 pounds to make the 50th cut on the hard manila rope. So that's what, 5 to 6 pounds worth of gain over 50 cuts. Not bad. I mean, that would be an edge that I would carry, but I probably wouldn't be all that happy with it. So anyway, so when I was sharpening on that stone, the feedback that the stone was giving me was telling me that I still had some of the 50 grit scratch pattern in the stone, that I hadn't got all of it out with the 220 loose carbide, loose stick powder. So what I did was, off camera, I went and I spent 5-8 minutes, something like that, on 220, and this is what I came up with. Now granted, this is a part of the stone, this is a real mottled color stone, so this is a mottled portion of it. But you can still kind of see that the scratch pattern in the stone is more like a 220 grit finish. Okay, you still got the stone particles and everything, and then this is, freshly lapped, so there's not a whole lot of trash in the surface of the stone at all. So we're going to do that last cut test over again, just because, like I said, the feedback that the stone was giving me was telling me, hey, you didn't get all the 50 grit scratches out yet. So let's grab the stone. Oh, we're going to need the knife. And I stuck it back in my pocket. Actually, you know what? Let's, because I didn't touch the edge of this before I stuck it in my pocket. And I ended up taking my wife out to lunch and everything while we were waiting for the video to finish uploading and everything. But this is still the scratch pattern off of that last, off that last sharpening. Okay, so, and then we did do the cut test before I put it away, and I never even touched the edge. So you see how that edge is really, really smooth and really, really straight? That's because it's worn down. The scratch pattern, looks okay. The edges of the gouges look a little bit, smoothed over to me, and they don't look quite as crisp or as good as what I think they're going to. So anyway, so that's what the edge looks like right now, with a 50 grit finish with a 220 over the top of it that I don't think was very consistent. Alright, so now let's bring you back down here. Let's oil up our stone. So now when I run my fingertips across it, it feels much more even and much smoother while still having some bite, like it's been lapped all the way down to 220. I know that probably sounds like not all that scientific and everything, but a lot of this I can feel and touch and feel and kind of go by my experience on that, and I can't really send that through the camera to you. Oh, now see that? That feels like it should at a 220 grit finish. It sounds the way it should, the feedback is the way it should be, and I'm already at a burr already, which is what this stone should be capable of. I mean, these Arkansas stones, if you, I haven't been working with them a whole lot, but I have worked with them, you know, a bit now. And what I've found is that if you keep them conditioned, they are not really slow stones at all. And a little bit more up in there. Yeah, they're actually, like I said, if you keep them conditioned and clean and with fresh surfaces on them, they're pretty quick cutting stones. I mean, they're not quite as fast as an India or a crystalline or a carborundum type stone, but they're definitely not slow. Okay, so we got that edge, or that burr weakened up pretty good. Now let's shear it. Not only are they not very slow, but they produce a really nice crisp edge if they're maintained right. Well, just a hair more. Sometimes this stainless, like I said, you'll get a burr on there and it'll just want to hang on. It seems like forever. Okay, so this edge ought to pop some hair. My arm's going to be bald by the time we're done. Yeah, it's popping hair on both sides. So we'll take a look at the edge and then we'll do a cut test. Okay, so now this is much more what I'm talking about. Now this amount of tooth is finer than the amount of tooth that you're going to get off of a fine India or a fine crystalline, okay? But it's fine, but it's still nice and crisp and toothy, okay? You can see the individual teeth on here. I mean, they're small, but they're there and they look nice and clean. These scratches, the scratches look nice and clean. There's still a little bit of the oil on the surface. But yeah, this is a good looking edge right here. Okay, so now let's see how it cuts, because that's all that really matters anyway. I mean, your edge can look absolutely beautiful, or you can even have one of them mirror finished edges that I, dislike so much. But when it comes down to it, how it cuts, that's what matters. Alright, so we got our block of wood, our rope, my hand, everything. We try to keep the weight at about 1 to 2 pounds. We take our edge on our knife, 8 to 9 pounds or so to make that first cut. So we got 8 to 9, now we'll do 50 cuts. Okay, now this one right here is the 50th or the 51st, somewhere around there. So we're at 0, about 12, 13. Okay, which that, 12, 13. Okay, now granted, remember all these tests, these cutting tests right here, to be super accurate, you have to average them. Okay, so to form any like real concrete conclusions, you'd have to take and do like 5 runs on each 5 runs on each grit, you know, of the stone, right? Okay, then not only do you have that, but you also have the variable of the guy behind the knife. All right, now that's the biggest variable. You know, I mean, first of all, how much rope have you cut? Second of all, your condition that day. You know, whether you're tired, whether you know, are fresh, whether you had enough coffee that morning, you know, whether you were arguing with your kids, you know, that morning, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? And then the biggest thing is your bias, okay? So, and you know, I mean, heck, I'm human, so I might have some of my bias in here also. In fact, I'd be real surprised if some of my bias didn't come into this, all right? You know, I'm a guy that likes toothy edges, okay, plain and simple. Like toothy edges that are on, you know, the coarse side of what it seems like most everybody else likes. So, you know, I mean, some of these tests could be skewed, even though I'm trying to be fair. You know, my personal bias, my subconscious, you know, could be telling my hand, hey, lighten up just a little bit at the end of that cut so that, you know, the scale doesn't quite show, you know, such a heavy reading. You know, it's entirely possible. But these rope cutting tests do give us a really good way to measure different things. Like in this case, you know, the finished grit of the stone. All right. So now this edge right here, you know, we just did 50 cuts. Now this edge is not done. You know, I mean, you could work this edge. I bet you could get another 50 cuts out of it before the pressure started getting, you know, just ridiculously high. You know, but then again, this is, you know, fairly soft stainless Victorinox, which, you know, that's not saying, I mean, that's not, when I say a soft stainless Victorinox blade, I'm not saying that is a bad thing, okay? For what these tools are, they need to be a little bit on the softer side because they're hardened, you know, they're a full hardened blade. Okay, so the tip, the belly of the edge, the spine, and the tang are all the same hardness. All right. When I make a pocket knife, or when I make pretty much any knife, okay, the edge portion is going to be at one hardness. The tang and the spine is going to be at another hardness. Okay, so I can run the edge, cutting edge, at whatever hardness it likes the most, and then run the spine and the tang softer to be able to support that edge. Okay, factories can't do that in a $20 knife. I mean, that's just they just can't afford to do that. Okay, so that's what I mean by a softer stainless. I'm not complaining about that at all. In fact, you can see this knife. This knife has been in my pocket a long time, and for a knife maker to carry another maker's knife, you know, that's a pretty big stamp of approval. Anyway, so that is our edge right there off of and I feel happy about that test. That stone felt good underneath the knife. The rope cutting test felt good. You know, there wasn't any wild swings or anything odd or anything about it. So we're going to call this one good. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now, usually I just shoot these videos and then you all see them as they happen, right? Okay, first of all, I do know how to edit a little bit. It takes me forever and I hate it, okay? So I show you everything the way it happens. First of all, I don't like editing. Second of all, I think it adds some credibility because I've edited like 6 times in this entire YouTube career thing, and I hope you guys appreciate the honesty that goes along with that. Okay, but this time it's just going to take too much time. So what I'm going to do is, off camera, I'm going to go ahead and shut you off, and I'm going to take this stone that's at 220 grit finish, and I'm going to go ahead and finish it to the pre-polish from the Thumbler's grit pack. And it might take a while because this stuff is classed as a 500 grit. And it is very, very fine. I mean, look at that. That's the oil you know, the mineral oil that's stuck to my finger. Oh, come on, let's get it back on there. I mean, it is truly a powder. You know, it feels finer than flour, you know, like all-purpose baking flour. It feels finer than that. So it might take a while to get the surface of that stone from 220 grit all the way down to 500 grit, okay? And I'm not going to make you watch that. There we go. So yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and shut you off, and I'm going to recut the face of this stone to that 500 grit, and then I'll turn you back on, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the stone at that 500 grit. And then we'll go ahead and sharpen the knife, see what the difference is, take a look at it underneath the scope, do a cut test, and then see what we see on that. If that looks promising, then we might go all the way to the polish, which is supposed to be a 1200 grit. Okay, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video. This has been a lot of fun playing around with this stone. So I'm enjoying it, even if you're not. So I will go ahead and recut the face of this stone and get back with you hopefully this evening. We'll talk to you later. Hi YouTube. You know, I'm going to stitch these videos together to make one video, so I probably don't have to do the introduction again. When I left you off the last time, we had just done the rope cutting test with my Victorinox tinker. Okay, on a stone. It was the second time we went through the Soft Arkansas from Natural Whetstone Company, and I had relapped it with 220 grit sick and done another rope cutting test with it, right? Okay, so, and then I told you I was going to shut you off, relap the stone with that Thumbler's pre-polish, okay? Now this, I honestly don't have a clue how it's going to turn out, okay? So this is the first time I've used the Thumbler's pre-polish. That stuff it's different than working with the coarse or the fine, okay? I've got some 600 grit sick powder, that graded stuff that I got from that other outfit wherever it was. It's a little bit more abrasive than this stuff is, okay? This stuff just stuck. I mean, everything stuck together, okay? So what I finally ended up doing was, after I fought it on the plate glass, you know, I would move it, and then it would catch the plate glass, and the plate glass would move all over the place, okay? So after I fought that for about 5 minutes or so, maybe 10, what I ended up doing was I grabbed this little Smith's Soft Arkansas stone, little 1 by probably 4 by 1/4 inch thick. And what I got to thinking is that stone is already flat, right? I mean, we flattened it with a 50, and then we conditioned it with a 50, and then I went over and flattened it and conditioned it again with the 120-220. And now we're just using a 500 grit pre-polish. So I can't imagine that we're going to be removing a whole lot of stone here, okay? I mean, enough that we're going to, like, dish it out. So I put the pre-polish on the stone and then used this little stone and, you know, rubbed it like that. Tried to keep a pretty even pattern going across the stone and everything, so I didn't wear out the middle or wear out the ends or anything like that. Finished with the fresh 500 grit pre-polish, and this is what we come up with. Now the stone to my fingertips does feel much finer than what it did at 220 grit. And you know, bear in mind, I mean, this is predominantly a white stone. Maybe we'll find a spot here that's got some more color in it. Maybe it'll show up better. That must be bits and pieces of the black stone, I would guess. Well, there we go. Well, no, not really. Well, I guess maybe this is about as good as we get. Okay, so now I don't really see much of any scratch pattern in the stone at all. Okay, all I see is nice and smooth. I do see a couple of little valleys here and there, you know, where bits of the stone are proud from, you know, the valleys of the stone. Okay, so I was going to test it and see how the knife felt on it. But then I thought, you know, we're in this together, right? So I'd wait until I got you so you can come with me. Okay, so it does feel smooth, but it does also feel abrasive at the same time. So it kind of, well, now that it dried out, it feels a little bit smoother than what it did when it was wet. You know, it doesn't feel like 600 grit sandpaper to me, that's for sure. It feels more like about 1,000 grit sandpaper, somewhere around in there, maybe even a little bit finer. So we will see what this does to our edge. It'll probably take longer to get our burr going. Yeah, that's it's got a little bit more bite than the glazed side, but it is not by much. We might be here a bit. Okay, so what I did, pretty much, I mean, I got ourselves a burr, but pretty much to get that burr, I raised the angle just ever so slightly and increased my pressure by quite a bit. And we're going to do that on the ends of the stone so that hopefully the middle of the stone will be more true to that pre-polish. So when we go to finish off the edge, maybe we'll see two scratch patterns. Okay. Okay, so let's lighten our pressure up considerably. I guess now we can start using the full length of the stone here. This feels weird going at that slightly higher edge angle. And honestly, when we're done with these tests, I'm going to take this blade back to probably that medium crystalline in that new stone that I just got from Sharpening Supplies. It's a medium crystalline on one side and a fine India on the other. And it's the jumbo sized stone, so you know, almost 12 inches long, 2.5 inches wide, and 1 inch thick. Okay, so this right here is telling me right now that we won't be going all the way to the polish on this stone. You know, the polish compound. Alright, so let's shear the burr off. A little bit more on that side. Yeah, because the edge is getting kind of thick because we've removed so much metal doing all these sharpening tests. But that's okay, because once the blade wears down to hardly anything, I'll probably just make a new blade for it. And then that'll be cool. I'll have the handiness of a Victorinox tinker. And if I'm going to make a big blade for it, I might as well make a little blade for it too. So then I'll have the handiness of a Victorinox tinker, but with really nice steel in the cutting blades. Okay. Now, this is better to me than what the glazed side was. Okay, the scratch pattern is starting to get fairly close to that glazed side pattern. That glazed side, I want to say, was about another 40% finer than what this was. Okay, but this is still a fairly sharp scratch pattern. Our edge is showing good tooth. It's showing some places where there's still a burr left, which would would bear to reason, because this stone isn't cutting as aggressively anymore, which means that it's not really shearing that, or it's not cutting that burr off. It's more kind of cut, fold, that sort of deal. Okay, so that might show up in our cut tests on the rope. Okay, so we got it sharp. Oh, we should probably do the thing. Man, if I've got any hair left at all. Okay, so it's still popping hairs off real easy. Okay, so we're at about a pound or so on our scale. No, we're already into, that was 14 or so. Let's try that again. 13. 13. Okay, so we are starting at 13 pounds. Alright, which is dang close to our glazed. When we started off with the glazed, we were at 15 to 16. Okay, so we're going to start at 13 pounds. Then we're going to do our 50 cuts. It's 48, 49. Okay, so on 50, there's our about pound. About 17. We'll try it again just because that's really high. 18. Yep, so 17 to 18. Okay, so we're still, in the realm of gaining 5 pounds over 50 cuts, but see where we're starting from. Okay, so I know now just by this rope cutting test here, when I'm done with this video, I'm going to take that stone right back down to a 220 grit finish. Okay, I might leave the glazed side just the way it is. I don't know. I might retest something on there. So I might leave the other side glazed over. Or honestly, this stone, I don't really use it all that much because I've got the 1 inch the 1 inch thick version, and I actually like it a little bit better. So I might just wash the stone off and stick it in the drawer and leave it there. Maybe I'll do some straight razor tests on it or something. Well, let's look at the edge again, and what we're going to see is a really, really smooth edge, I bet. Yeah, so we've got a really smooth edge where we were having to put so much force onto the edge of that knife to get it to cut through the rope that parts of the edge are starting to bend over. Okay, so that's also a geometry lesson. Okay, so the thinner and more aggressive that you can make that knife cut, that means it cuts with less amount of force. Okay, if it cuts with a less amount of force, that means you're putting less stress on the edge of the knife. If you're putting less stress on the edge of the knife, your edge retention goes up. Okay, yeah, we're just going to leave that at that for, because that's just kind of like a tidbit of edge geometry slipped into a sharpening video. What it looks like to me also here is that rope is actually starting to smooth out the scratches on the edge bevels. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that looks to me like what's starting to happen. Okay, so like the sharpening stone, like I said, it feels like 1,000, maybe 1,500 grit sandpaper, and it's almost like the rope is at a 2,000 grit, and so it's kind of starting to polish polish the tops of the scratches in a different pattern, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, so this stone right here, the way we've got it set up right now, you know, I might use it for like a straight razor or something, but for a working knife type of deal, that's entirely not my taste in edges. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But so I'll go over kind of my big thoughts on. Okay, so the reason I wanted to start playing around with oil stones again was, one, the diamond stones that I've been getting, they are not of the same quality that they used to be. Okay, they're coming with extra blobs of diamonds all over the surface of the stone that you have to dig out with an old chisel or something, and then the remaining diamonds are nice and sharp, but it seems like they're not sticking to the plate as well as what they used to. Okay, it's like they're shearing off really quick and they're dulling really fast. And like I said, I used to go through 2 to 3 of those diamond stones a year. Seems like lately, even without making as many knives, I'm going through like 5 or 6 of them a year, and it's just kind of annoying, really. You know, I mean, you want to break a stone in, get it to that cutting, you know, that stage where it cuts the way you want it to, and then let it settle there and sit there for a while. You know, I mean, it's kind of like an old pair of boots. You don't want to constantly have to break in a new pair of boots, because that sucks. So that got me into the oil stones. Now, granted, when I learned about the silicon carbide powder and I bought some and I tried some, my first thought was, oh, first, this is really nice. Now I can clean and condition and refreshen oil stones. Okay, so, and mostly I was after the silicon carbide crystalline stones and the fine India by Norton. Right? Well, then I kind of got into these naturals a little bit, because I thought, okay, well, if they're a continuous surface, a continuous rock, and I can select what grit to finish this stone off at, then it ought to cut very close to that grit. And then I can take, you know, a soft Arkansas stone, and I can turn it into, you know, that 300 or 400 grit sharpening stone, that grit range that I like so much. That didn't turn out to be the case. Okay, you finish this stone at 50 grit, and it cuts awful. I mean, it cuts, but it doesn't bring out. It doesn't cut like it should. Okay, you finish it to 220 grit. Now, as far as I can tell, that's the sweet spot. Now, granted, I've got 36 grit, 60, 90, 220, and 600 graded powder. Okay, if I hit it with 300 grit powder instead of 220, that might be better. If I hit it with 120 instead of 220, it might be better. I don't know. But 220 seems to be the sweet spot for me. With that 220, it produces an edge that is coarser, or that is finer, than, it's less toothy than what I get off the fine side of the Norton crystalline, or the fine side off of the Norton India. It's kind of right on the edge of, I mean, it's a pleasant edge, okay? Right now, almost all my kitchen knives are rocking the edge off of one of my other arcs from Natural Whetstone Company. I mixed them up half with the soft arc and half with the hard arc. Both of them finished to 220 grit. I actually like the hard arc a little bit better. And it is a nice, fine, toothy edge, and it works really good in the kitchen. My boy actually likes it. Now, I cut almost everything on a draw, which means that I like a toothy edge, right? He does an awful lot more push cutting than I do. And we've been finding that edge is a really nice balance of a push cut edge like what he likes, and a coarse toothy edge like what I like. So I'm going to have to play with it a little bit more. Hunting season's coming up, so I'll end up working up a couple animals with those edges and really kind of play with it some more. But But yeah, it's a nice edge. I would carry a knife sharpened on a soft or a hard arc with a 220 grit finish on the arc. I mean, I'd carry that all day long and, you know, would get by really well with it, which, you know, is saying an awful lot for me, being a die-hard, coarser, toothier type fan. Yeah, so these stones, you can adjust their grit rating a little bit, okay? But you can't adjust them like what I was thinking that you could, or I haven't found out how to yet. So this stone right here, they class it as being like a 6 to an 800 grit. You know, I mean, I'm guessing they're all natural stones, so this one right here might be a 600 grit, and 3 or 4 layers of rock over, that might be an 800 grit, right? And then you can vary them a little bit by how you condition them with your silicon carbide powder, and whether they're glazed or not. So you can play with the grit ratings a little bit. I think maybe you could, like, let's say if this was a 600, or let's say it was 800, you could probably bring it down to almost a 600, and you can probably take it up to like a 1500, but you can't do much more than that, or at least I haven't figured out how to. So yeah, so this was a really interesting series for me. Boy, I mean, honestly, if you guys didn't like it, I'm not too sure that that bothers me at all, because I enjoyed it so much. And you know, I use YouTube as kind of like a running logbook also. So so this was very, very interesting to me. The next one that I believe we're going to do is I'm going to go through this same test. Depends on how the editing goes. I might speed it up for y'all and edit in portions of it. But I have a well, the other finer, the hard arcs that I have, I've got one this size from Natural Whetstone Company that is a they're translucent black. That is a hard stone to lap now. It wasn't flat or the same thickness when I got it, so I wore out a piece of plate glass and went through a whole bunch of sick powder getting it pretty close. So that stone I'd rather not mess with. But I have a Dan's black, but it's part of a black soft combo. So we only have one side of it exposed. And I'd like to do the same thing, you know, where we glaze one side and then you know, try the other side on different grits, because that's the same piece of rock, you know, so it takes a variable out. But I do have a fairly nice, actually we'll grab it right quick. I do have a pretty nice Dan's translucent that I picked up at the pawn shop like 2 or 3 years ago for, this is going to make y'all cry, like $10, okay? It's only a 1/2 inch thick, but we have both sides of it, so we could glaze one side and then cut the other side at, maybe we'd start off at like 220 and then maybe try the, well no, yeah, probably the 220 and then like the 600 graded, and then maybe try the pre-polish. And with this stone we might even go with the polish. But it's a pretty sweet stone. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Oh yeah. Look at that. Gorgeous little stone. So we might play with it next time. And do kind of the same test. And see if the denser Arkansas stones, if they act the same way as the soft Arkansas stones do. I think they probably will, but I don't know that for a fact. So, yeah, maybe we'll get on to that. But that'll be at least in a couple of days. Okay, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. I hope you enjoyed this video series. I sure am enjoying the heck out of it. It's a ton of fun. And we will see you next time.